The lights outside grew brighter, sweeping across the trees, crawling closer to the cabin. Ethan knew the walls would not hide them for long. Not from something this strange, this advanced. He thought quickly, his mind racing through every trap, every trick, every skill he had ever learned. He could not fight them with strength, but maybe he could fight them with cleverness. He whispered to Lyra, his voice low, "Stay here, quiet." And she clutched his arm, shaking her head. Her fear was clear. She did not want him to go, but he gently pulled free. He picked up his lantern, doused it, and slipped out the back door into the cold night. The forest air bit at his face, but his mind was sharp, his body steady. He moved quickly, setting traps as he went, simple ones but fast. Ropes hidden under leaves, nets tied between trees, branches cut to fall with a pull of a cord. They would not stop the hunters, but they might confuse them, slow them, buy time. He worked in silence, the faint glow of the machines growing brighter behind him. Suddenly, a beam of white light swept across the trees, passing just inches from his back. Ethan froze, his breath caught in his throat. The machine hummed softly as it hovered, scanning the ground. Then it moved on, drifting deeper into the forest, unaware of the man watching from the shadows. Ethan returned to the cabin, slipping inside silently. Lyra's eyes met his, wide with worry. But when she saw he had come back unharmed, her glow softened slightly. She whispered his name, broken but clear, "Ethan." And in her voice there was more than fear. There was trust. Ethan nodded, his axe in hand once more, and together they waited. Outside, the hunters moved closer, their lights surrounding the cabin like a cage of pale fire. The silence of the forest was broken only by the hum of machines. Ethan's traps waited in the dark, ready to spring. And in the cabin, human and alien sat side by side, ready for the storm that was about to fall. The simple act of sharing food was more powerful than words. It was a message older than any language. Peace, trust, survival together. Lyra's glow brightened faintly, and Ethan saw for the first time a shadow of something softer on her face. Not fear, not anger, but perhaps the smallest seed of trust. As the day passed, they tried more gestures, more sounds, more small lessons. Ethan pointed at the axe and said, "Weapon." Lyra looked at it with fear, then spoke her word, "Toller." She pointed at the lantern and whispered, "Lunare," Ethan repeated, and she nodded slowly. They built a tiny shared world, one word at a time, one gesture at a time. But beneath this fragile connection, a darker truth remained. Lyra's eyes often lifted to the sky, her body tense, her glow dimming whenever she saw the clouds shift. Ethan noticed, and though he did not understand her words, he understood her fear. Someone was hunting her, and the accident that brought her to him was not the end, it was the beginning. That night, when the forest grew dark again, Lyra sat close to the fire Ethan built. She still kept distance, but her eyes no longer carried only suspicion. She studied the flames, whispering strange words, perhaps names, perhaps memories. Ethan listened, though he could not understand, and when she grew quiet, he whispered back, "You're safe." For the first time, Lyra did not flinch. She closed her glowing eyes, her head tilting slightly, her breathing deep and steady. Ethan watched her in the firelight, realizing the truth. She feared he would harm her, but instead she was beginning to see he would not, and somewhere in the shadows of the forest, far beyond the firelight, unseen shapes moved silently between the trees. The hunters had come closer, and the fragile connection they had built would soon be tested. Ethan took the pouch back, opened it, and drank a mouthful. Then he set it down again and pushed it toward her once more. This time she blinked, her glowing fingers twitching. Slowly, she reached forward, snatched the pouch, and pulled it back against her chest. Her lips touched the water, and she drank in quick, desperate gulps. When she finished, she gasped for breath. Some of the glow in her skin brightened again. She looked at Ethan, her eyes softer now, not safe but less sharp than before. Ethan nodded slowly as if to say, "See, I will not harm you." The alien woman lowered the pouch, clutching it like something precious. A faint sound left her throat, almost like thanks, almost like a sigh. Ethan felt a strange warmth in his chest, the first fragile bridge of trust, but he also saw the shadow of fear still heavy in her eyes. Every part of her said she expected betrayal, she expected pain, she expected chains. Ethan sat down on the cold ground, leaving a wide space between them. He leaned against another tree, showing he was not going to force her. The alien woman watched, confusion flickering across her face. For the first time, she saw a human who did not try to capture, control, or command. The forest grew quiet again. The only sound was the wind moving through branches. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment, his body tired, but he stayed alert. He could feel her gaze on him, studying him as if searching for his true nature. Hours passed slowly, until at last she let her body relax just enough to lean against the oak tree. Ethan whispered one more time, "You're safe here." Though he knew she could not understand, but maybe she felt it. Maybe she heard it in his tone. Her silver eyes blinked once, and her glow dimmed slightly, like a lantern calming before sleep. Ethan stayed awake, watching the forest, guarding a stranger who feared him. Neither of them knew that above the clouds, a light flickered once more. Her hunters were still searching, their machines scanning the skies. The accident that had brought them together was only the first step. Soon danger would test whether fear could become trust, and whether a simple human could stand against the unknown. The alien woman sat weakly against the tree, her breathing fast but calmer than before. She kept her eyes on him, not trusting but not attacking. Ethan stepped back, giving her space, the axe still on the ground. His lantern light and her glowing skin made the forest look like another world. The silence stretched again. Ethan wanted to ask questions, but he knew there were no answers he could understand. Still, deep inside, he felt this moment was the beginning of something greater. He had caught an alien woman by accident, but instead of danger, he had found mystery, fear, and perhaps a strange connection. And in the shadows of the forest, unseen by both of them, another light flickered high above the clouds. Something was searching, something was watching, and this was only the beginning. The forest was still, but inside Ethan's chest, his heart beat like a drum. The alien woman sat against the tree, her silver hair glowing in the faint lantern light, her strange eyes fixed on him. She did not move, only watched, every muscle tense like a wild animal ready to escape. Ethan did not speak at first. He only breathed slowly, trying to calm both himself and her. He had freed her from the trap, but trust did not come so easily. Every time he shifted or took a step, her body flinched as if expecting pain. Her hands trembled, her gaze darting from him to the trees around them. Ethan realized she was not just hurt, she was hunted by fear itself. He whispered, "It's all right. You're free now." Though he knew she could not understand. Still, the sound of his voice made her tilt her head, the glow in her skin flickering. She answered with a sound, soft but sharp, like glass breaking underwater. The language was impossible, yet the feeling behind it was clear. Suspicion, warning, a plea to stay away. Ethan lowered his axe to the ground and lifted both hands. Empty. He moved, slowly, step by step, not toward her but toward the trap he had built. He touched the broken net, showing her that it was gone, finished, no longer holding her. Her glowing eyes followed his every movement, cautious, calculating, uncertain. She said another word, one that sounded like Shaolin, her voice trembling. Ethan did not know what it meant, but he repeated softly, "Shaolin," hoping it was not a mistake. Her eyes widened at his attempt, and for the first time she did not look only afraid, she looked surprised. It was as if she realized he was trying to understand, not command. Still, her body shook, and Ethan could see how weak she was. Her legs trembled when she tried to rise, but she collapsed back against the tree. Without thinking, Ethan stepped forward to help, his hands reaching out. The alien woman cried out, her voice sharp and filled with fear, and she scrambled back. Her glowing hand lifted, and for a heartbeat Ethan thought she would strike him with some strange power, but she did not. She only held her hand like a shield, her whole body shaking. Ethan froze, not wanting to push her further. He bent down slowly, picking up his lantern and then placed it between them on the ground. The soft yellow glow lit both faces, human and alien, showing their fear and their distance. Minutes passed, long and heavy, until Ethan pulled off his leather pouch of water. He placed it on the ground, then pushed it gently toward her, never stepping closer. The alien woman stared, her eyes narrowing, her chest rising and falling fast. She did not move, as if expecting the pouch to be a trick, poison, or weapon. The night passed slowly, and when the first light of dawn touched the trees, Ethan was still awake. The alien woman, weak and tired, had drifted into a restless sleep against the oak tree, her glowing skin fading in and out like a fading ember. Ethan sat nearby, his back against another tree, his axe resting at his side, his lantern now dim. He had not closed his eyes, not even for a moment, because he knew she did not trust him yet, and perhaps she had every reason. When she opened her eyes, the morning sun made her silver hair shine like a river of light. She looked around quickly, fear flashing across her face, but then she saw him sitting quietly, not moving, not threatening. He lifted his hands slowly, showing they were empty, and nodded once. The alien woman tilted her head, her eyes narrowing, as if she could not understand why he was still there, why he had not harmed her while she slept. Ethan spoke softly, "Good morning," though he knew she would not understand the words. Still, his calm tone seemed to reach her, because her shoulders relaxed slightly. She touched her chest with one hand and whispered something, a sound like, "Lyra," her voice trembling but clear. Ethan repeated the word, "Lyra," pointing gently toward her, then touching his own chest. "Ethan." For the first time, her eyes widened, not with fear but with curiosity. She blinked, then pointed at him, repeating softly, "Van." Her voice broke the word into pieces, strange but close enough. Ethan smiled faintly, and she tilted her head again, studying the way his face changed. Something fragile began to grow in that moment, a bridge of sound, gesture, and feeling. They had no common language, yet they began to find one. Ethan drew a line in the dirt with a stick, then sketched a simple shape, a circle for the sun. Lyra leaned forward, her silver eyes brightening, and she traced a shape of her own, something strange and elegant, almost like a star broken in half. Ethan stared at it, not understanding, but he could feel it had meaning. He tapped her drawing, then tapped his chest as if asking what it was. She whispered again, a soft tone that sounded like Orin, the word echoing like music. Ethan repeated it clumsily, "Orin," and she gave the faintest nod. Hour by hour, they shared more. He pointed to the sky and said, "Sky." She answered with her own word, a sound like Shira. He pointed to the forest and said, "Forest." She spoke another word, "Vanal." It was slow, broken, sometimes frustrating, but with each exchange, a spark of understanding grew brighter, yet still fear did not vanish. Every sudden noise in the forest made Lyra stiffen, her glowing skin pulsing with alarm. When a branch snapped in the distance, she crouched low, her hands ready to shield herself. Ethan quickly shook his head, pointing at himself, tapping his chest, and saying firmly, "Safe, safe." Her eyes locked on his, and for the first time, she did not turn away. It was as if she was searching inside him, reading something deeper than words, and what she found made her glow dim just enough to show she believed, even if only for a moment. She sat back down slowly, her body still trembling but no longer trying to run. Ethan shared a piece of bread from his pouch, holding it out in his palm. Lyra hesitated, her silver eyes narrowing again, to show it was safe. Ethan took a bite first, then placed the rest on a flat stone and pushed it toward her. Lyra reached out, her glowing fingers brushing the rough surface, and finally took the bread, chewing carefully. The hunter's machines hovered outside the cabin, their cold white lights sweeping across the trees like searching eyes. Inside, Ethan and Lyra crouched low, their breathing quiet, their hearts pounding. Ethan gripped his axe tightly, but he knew it was no use against machines of metal and fire. Strength alone could not save them, only cleverness could, and cleverness was something he had. Lyra whispered in her broken voice, "Run, Ethan. They take me, not you." Her silver eyes shone with fear and sorrow, as if she had already accepted her fate. But Ethan shook his head, his voice steady. "No, we fight." Though he knew fight was not the right word, he was not a soldier, not a hero, only a man who knew the forest better than anyone. The machines moved closer, beams of light sliding across the cabin walls. Ethan's traps were waiting in the dark, ropes stretched, branches balanced, nets ready to fall. They were simple, almost laughable against such powerful hunters, but they were not built to win. They were built to confuse. Confusion was his weapon, and time was his ally. The first machine drifted too close, its pale glow brushing against the wooden wall. Ethan pulled Lyra down just as a beam of light cut through a crack, searching for life. The machine hovered, then moved toward the back of the cabin. Ethan knew it was only seconds before they found the door. He whispered quickly to Lyra, "Stay hidden," then slipped out through a side window. The cold night air hit his face, the forest silent except for the hum of alien metal. He crouched low, moving fast to the nearest trap, a rope tied high between two trees, holding a heavy log above. The machine drifted forward, its white beam cutting through branches. When it passed under the trap, Ethan pulled the rope hard. The log swung down with a loud crack, slamming into the machine's side. The sphere spun wildly, its light flickering before it crashed into the ground with a heavy thud. Ethan's chest burned with fear and triumph. One trap had worked, but he knew there were more, and the rest would not fall so easily. Another machine turned sharply, its light sweeping the trees as it searched for the attacker. Ethan ducked low, crawling through leaves, moving toward the next trap. Lyra watched from the cabin window, her silver eyes wide with shock. She had thought humans were weak, fragile, helpless against her kind's hunters. But this man was using the forest itself as his weapon. Every move was brave, every risk unthinkable, yet he did it without hesitation. The second trap was simple, a net of vines strung between two trees. Ethan waited in silence as the machine drifted forward. When it passed through, the vines tangled in its glowing core, pulling it down. The machine spun, lights flaring, before crashing into the dirt with sparks. A sharp noise filled the forest, not from the machine, but from the sky. More lights appeared above the clouds, more hunters drawn to the fight. Ethan's jaw tightened, his traps would not last forever. But he refused to stop, because stopping meant losing, and losing meant Lyra would be taken. He set off the third trap, branches sharpened into spikes that swung down from ropes. The machine dodged faster than he expected, but one spike scraped its side, making it falter. Ethan used the moment to throw his axe, the blade striking the glowing seam of the machine. It sparked, spun, then fell with a loud crash, smoke rising into the night. Lyra gasped, her hand covering her mouth. She could not believe what she saw. A human with no weapons of power, no machines, only wood, stone, and courage. Yet he had brought down not one but 3 hunters. Her fear of him was changing into something else. Respect, wonder, and perhaps hope. But Ethan was not finished. He ran to the last trap, a pit he had dug earlier for wild animals, covered with branches and leaves. The final machine glided closer, scanning the ground. Together was all that mattered now. They reached a clearing where the hunter's ship loomed closer, its engines roaring like thunder. Ethan stopped, his mind racing, looking for anything he could use, any chance at survival. Lyra followed his gaze, and for the first time her glow brightened with power instead of fear. Her voice was soft but clear. "I help." She raised her hands, her silver light flaring into the night. Energy pulsed from her skin, striking the ground and shaking the air like lightning. The nearest machine spun, its glow flickering as her power struck it, sending it crashing into the dirt. Ethan stared, stunned, but then moved quickly, pulling ropes from his pack and setting another trap. Man and alien fought side by side, one with light and one with earth. Lyra's glow blasted machines from the sky, while Ethan's traps tangled others in nets and ropes. He swung his axe at weak spots, striking sparks and tearing metal. For a moment, against all odds, they pushed back the hunters, but the ship above grew louder, its massive form lowering through the clouds. Lyra stumbled, her light dimming, her strength failing. Ethan caught her, holding her steady, his voice urgent. "Not done yet, not while we breathe." Her eyes filled with tears, but she nodded weakly, trusting him fully now. The ship's lights widened, ready to strike them both. Ethan looked around desperately, then spotted a ravine nearby, a narrow cut in the forest floor. Without thinking, he lifted Lyra onto his shoulder and ran, every muscle burning, every breath a battle. The light struck behind him, trees exploding, fire tearing across the clearing, but he leapt into the ravine just as the beam hit. The world shook, dirt and stone raining down. Ethan shielded Lyra with his body, pain searing his arms and back. When the dust cleared, they were alive, hidden in the narrow crack of the earth. Above them, the hunters searched, but the ravine's shadow shielded them. Hours passed before the hum of the ship began to fade. The hunters pulled back, their machines retreating one by one. Ethan and Lyra stayed still, their bodies weak, their bond the only strength left. At last, silence returned, broken only by their ragged breaths. When Ethan helped Lyra climb out of the ravine, the forest was broken but alive. Fires smoldered, trees lay shattered, yet the stars shone faintly above the smoke. Lyra looked at the sky, her voice soft. "No home." But then she turned to him, her glow gentle. "But with you." Ethan met her gaze, his voice rough but certain. "You're safe here with me." In that moment, the bond between them became something unshakable. They were no longer hunter and hunted, no longer alien and human. They were survivors, partners, bound not by fear, but by choice. And though the hunters would return, though danger would always linger, they would face it together. The cabin was gone, the traps destroyed, but Ethan did not care. He had found something more important than walls or weapons. Lyra had found something her people had forgotten: mercy, courage, and the human spirit. And together, under the broken sky, they began a new story. one of trust, of survival, and of hope. Because sometimes the strongest bond is not made of blood or power, but of hearts that choose to stand side by side. And in the quiet forest, man and alien walked forward, ready for whatever came next. The night was heavy with silence, the fire cracked softly, and above the trees the clouds moved like dark waves. Ethan sat close to the fire, his axe resting on his knee, his eyes watching the forest shadows. Lyra sat across from him, her glow dim, her silver eyes reflecting the flames like mirrors. For a moment, it almost felt calm, almost safe, as if they were two travelers sharing warmth on a cold night. But the silence of the forest was not natural. The owls were quiet, the crickets silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Ethan noticed first, his instincts sharpened from years of living alone in the wild. Something was wrong, something unseen was moving through the darkness. Lyra felt it too, her body stiffened, her glow flickering as her eyes darted upward to the sky. She whispered a word under her breath, soft but sharp, like Vorak, and the fear in her tone was clear. Ethan followed her gaze and saw faint flashes above the clouds, small but quick, like lightning. But he knew it was not lightning. It was something else, something searching. Lyra's hands trembled as she clutched her chest, her silver hair falling across her face. Her whole body shook as if she already knew what was coming. She turned to Ethan, her eyes wide, and whispered another word. Hunters, her voice trembling with broken English. Ethan froze, the meaning clear even through the cracks of language. He stood quickly, scanning the dark forest. Far in the distance, beyond the line of trees, strange lights flickered, white, cold and unnatural. They were not torches, not lanterns, not anything human. They glided between the trees without sound, moving closer, one by one. Lyra pushed herself to her feet, her glow brighter now, fear pouring out of her skin like light through glass. She stumbled toward Ethan, her voice desperate. They come, they find me. Hide. Her words were broke, but her meaning sharp. Ethan grabbed his axe, his heart racing, and nodded firmly. He led her toward his cabin, moving quickly but silently through the undergrowth. Lyra followed, her movements weak but urgent, her glowing skin making her stand out in the dark. Ethan quickly pulled off his coat and wrapped it around her, dimming her glow beneath the heavy fabric. She looked at him with surprise, but there was no time for words, only survival. They reached the cabin, the small wooden walls standing like a fragile shield against the vast night. Ethan pushed the door open, guiding her inside, then shut it quietly. The fire inside had burned down to coals, giving only faint light. He set his axe by the door and peered through a small crack in the shutters. Outside, the strange lights floated closer, moving in a slow line. They were not torches but machines, spheres of metal glowing with pale fire. They moved like predators, scanning the ground with beams of white light. Ethan held his breath, his hand tight on the wood of the shutter. Lyra crouched low inside the cabin, pulling the coat tighter around her. Her silver eyes were wide, her lips trembling as she whispered in her own language, prayers or warnings Ethan could not tell. She looked at him, desperation shining in her gaze as if begging him not to give her away. Ethan met her eyes, and in silence he gave her a promise. He would not. Ethan lived alone in a small wooden cabin near the edge of a dark forest. He was a quiet man, a simple hunter, and he liked building traps to catch rabbits, deer, or sometimes wild birds. For him, the forest was home. It gave him food, it gave him peace, and it kept him far away from noisy towns. That night, the sky was full of clouds, no stars, no moon, only silence broken by the sound of crickets. Ethan checked his traps one by one, walking with a small lantern in his hand. He was tired, ready to sleep, when suddenly, from deep inside the forest, he heard a loud crash. It was the sound of one of his traps snapping shut, but this sound was different, louder, heavier, almost like a tree falling. Ethan's heart beat faster. He thought maybe it was a big animal, maybe even a bear. He grabbed his axe for safety and moved carefully toward the sound. The forest felt strange, the air colder, the silence thicker. Even the crickets had stopped singing. His lantern shook in his hand, the yellow light dancing over roots and fallen leaves. Step by step, he reached the place where he had set a heavy trap near an old oak tree. What he saw froze him in place. Inside the trap was not an animal, not a deer, not a bear, not even anything he could name. There, tangled in the net, was a figure glowing faint blue light. It was tall, slender, and strange, with hair like silver threads and eyes shining like liquid glass. It was a woman, but not human. Her skin shimmered with soft patterns like moving starlight. Ethan stood still, his mouth open, his mind refusing to believe. The woman struggled. her arms and legs caught in the ropes, her breath fast, her face full of fear. She made strange sounds, a language Ethan had never heard, high and soft, like music and static mixed together. She pulled hard against the ropes, but every move made the trap tighten more. Her glowing skin flickered. As if she was weak or wounded, Ethan's first thought was to run, but his feet did not move. His second thought was that maybe he was dreaming, but the cold night air and the heavy axe in his hand told him it was real. The alien woman looked at him with wide, terrified eyes. She seemed to believe he was the danger, that he would harm her. Ethan could feel her fear, sharp and clear, even without words. For a long moment, man and alien stared at each other in silence. The forest around them was so quiet, it felt like the whole world was holding its breath. Ethan's mind raced. He thought, what is she? Where did she come from? And what am I supposed to do now? His heart told him one thing. She was not an enemy. She was just lost, trapped, and scared. Slowly, Ethan lowered his axe. He wanted to show he meant no harm. He stepped closer, careful, his hands open. The alien woman flinched, twisting against the ropes again, and the net cut into her glowing skin. Ethan stopped, his voice soft. Easy, easy. I won't hurt you, though he knew she could not understand. Still, his tone carried kindness, and her glowing eyes blinked with confusion. He bent down near the trap, his fingers working the knots. The ropes were tight, strong, but he pulled and loosened them slowly. The alien woman watched every move, ready to fight or flee. Ethan kept speaking softly, words she did not know but feelings she could sense. At last, the net loosened enough for her to breathe easier. Then she whispered something, her voice trembling like wind and metal. Ethan could not understand, but it did not sound like anger. It sounded like fear, mixed with hope. He kept working until one of her arms was free. Her skin was warm, too warm, like fire hidden under soft light. She did not strike him, she did not run, she only stared, her silver hair falling across her face. Finally, Ethan cut the last knot. And the trap fell to the ground. The night air smelled of smoke and broken metal. The forest floor was littered with sparks and shattered pieces of the hunter's machines. Ethan leaned against a tree, his chest heaving, sweat dripping down his face, his hands raw from gripping the axe. He had fought harder than ever before, and though he had survived, his traps were gone, his strength almost spent. Beside him, Lyra knelt, her silver glow soft but steady, her eyes fixed on him as if he were something she could not understand. She touched his arm gently, her fingers warm, her voice shaking. You, fight for me. Her words were broken, but the meaning was clear, and Ethan nodded slowly. Because you needed me, he said, though he knew she would only catch pieces of his speech. Yet his tone, his eyes, his actions, they carried more weight than words. Lyra looked down, her silver hair falling across her face. She whispered in her own language, sounds soft and musical, like sorrow carried by wind. Ethan could not understand, but he felt the sadness in her voice, the loneliness, the fear. When she looked up again, her eyes shimmered with light and with something new. Trust. They returned to the cabin together, their steps slow and heavy. Inside, Ethan rebuilt the fire, the flames casting warm light against the wooden walls. Lyra sat close, wrapping herself in his coat, her glow hidden but her presence strong. For the first time, she did not sit far away. She stayed near him, as if the distance between them was finally fading. Hours passed in silence, but it was no longer an uneasy silence. Ethan sharpened his axe, his movements steady, while Lyra traced strange glowing symbols on the wooden floor. She drew circles, stars, shapes that looked like fragments of constellations. Ethan watched quietly, and when she noticed his gaze, she spoke one word, home, her voice trembling. He nodded slowly, understand, ding without needing more. Her home was far away, a place of stars and endless skies, and now it was lost to her. Ethan placed his hand on the wood beside her drawings, then tapped his chest. Home. Lyra tilted her head, her eyes soft, and after a pause, she touched her chest as well, whispering, home. It was a fragile moment, but it carried weight. She was beginning to see Earth not as a prison, but as a place where she was not alone. Ethan too felt something stir inside him, a bond deeper than fear or survival. He had lived in silence for years, yet now he found himself wanting to speak, to share, to protect. That night, as the fire burned low, Lyra leaned closer, her silver eyes half closed. Her voice was soft, almost like a song. "Lyra," she said again, pointing at herself. Ethan repeated, "Lyra," and then touched his chest. "Ethan." Her lips curved slightly, not quite a smile, but something close. The warmth of the fire mixed with the glow of her skin, and the cabin felt different. Not just a place of wood and stone, but a place where two worlds touched. Ethan did not reach for her, did not try to force closeness. But still, the bond grew. It was built of trust, of choice, of moments shared in danger and in silence. Later, Lyra whispered in broken English, "Why, you no fear me?" Ethan paused, thinking, then answered slowly, "Because I see you are more afraid than me." She blinked, her eyes wet with faint light, and her glow shimmered brighter. For her, no one had ever spoken like that. No one had looked at her as something fragile, something worth saving. Outside, the hunters' machines were silent for now, but Ethan knew they would come again. The battle was not over, the danger not gone, yet in the quiet between storms, something new had been born, a connection stronger than fear, a bond neither of them had expected. As the night deepened, Lyra grew weak again, exhaustion pulling at her body. She leaned against the wall, her head tilting slightly toward Ethan. He hesitated, then placed the coat more firmly around her shoulders. She looked at him with tired eyes, and this time she did not pull away. Ethan sat beside her, his axe resting within reach, his eyes watching the fire. He felt her breathing slow, steady, her glow dimming as she drifted into sleep. He did not move, he did not sleep, he only kept watch because that was what he could give her. Protection, safety, trust. Above the forest, the clouds shifted, revealing faint stars. Among them, a brighter light blinked, moving slowly across the sky. It was not a star, not a plane, but another hunter ship searching the land below. The danger had not ended, but Ethan and Lyra now faced it, not as strangers, but as something more. And though neither of them said it out loud, both knew the truth. The bond they had formed in the dark forest was stronger than fear. It was the beginning of something rare, something powerful, and in the battles yet to come, that bond would be their greatest weapon. The forest was quiet for only a short time, but silence never lasted long when the hunters searched. Above the trees, a heavy hum began to rise, deep and steady, shaking the earth under Ethan's feet. Lyra woke suddenly, her silver eyes wide, her glow trembling with fear. She whispered one word in her broken English, "Ship." And Ethan knew at once the real danger had arrived. Through the cracks in the cabin shutters, he saw the sky torn open by light. A massive vessel hovered above the forest, its shadow stretching across the land like a storm. Beams of pale fire cut down through the trees, searching, burning, scanning for her. This was no scout, no small machine. This was the hunter's warship, and it had come for Lyra. Ethan's hands tightened on his axe, but he knew it would not be enough. His traps had fooled smaller machines, but against this ship they would fail. Still, he refused to give her up, not after all they had survived, not after the ball. And they had built. He turned to Lyra, his voice steady. "We need to move. Now." She shook her head, her voice breaking. "No. They find. No escape." Her glow dimmed, her body trembling, her spirit heavy with despair. But Ethan's eyes burned with fire. "If we run, maybe we live. If we stay, we die." The words were simple, but the meaning was clear, and Lyra stared at him in silence. At last she nodded, weak but willing. Ethan pulled her close, wrapping her in his coat to dim her glow. Together they slipped out the back of the cabin, moving quickly into the thick trees. The forest was alive with beams of light, cutting through branches, searching, destroying. Ethan led her through paths only he knew. Places where roots formed natural tunnels, where fallen logs made hidden bridges. But the hunters were fast, their machines dropping from the ship like shadows with glowing eyes. One beam of white fire swept past, burning a tree to ash in seconds. Lyra cried out, but Ethan pulled her down into the dirt, covering her with his body until the light moved on. Her silver eyes met his, wide and shaken, and for the first time she understood fully. He would die before he let them take her. The thought broke something inside her fear, and replaced it with something stronger. She touched his chest, whispering through tears, "Together." And Ethan only nodded, breathless but fierce.